This is BJJHOOD, tapping into Jiu-Jitsu lives on and off the mats.
Hello, we are back. This is the BJJHOOD Podcast. I'm Baby, your host.
And Shay, your co-host.
We're here to share inspirational stories about women in Jiu-Jitsu and how the martial art changed their lives. You know that every Thursday we have a new episode coming out here on the BJJHOOD Podcast. So make sure you're following us on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss any of the new episodes. And also we are on YouTube with subtitles in Portuguese for all the interviews that are in English and subtitles in English for all the interviews that are in Portuguese. Make sure you're following us also on Instagram. That's where we're posting snippets of the interviews, some information about our guests. And I think that's the easiest way for you to communicate with us, for us to build this community. So make sure you're following us there. We are there as BJJHOOD Podcast. And when you see something that you like, make sure you share with your friends. The support is really, really important for us to keep doing this work here, to keep bringing guests and bringing people here to the BJJHOOD Podcast. I have a little bit of a cold, so I'm just going to say I'm sorry if I'm like sneezing, sniffling at some point here, but I'll try my best to keep myself not doing that. Today here we have our guest. It's Cathryn Ivy. She started Jiu-Jitsu in 2015 and just got her black belt in December last year. She is at Drugs MMA. She's a gym owner, 2 times IBJJF world champion. She's a registered nurse, and something a little different from her, she's a raccoon mama. So we're going to talk to her about her story in Jiu-Jitsu, a little bit about being a nurse and her life. I just want to say thank you for coming today, Cathryn. It's a pleasure to be talking to you.
I'm excited. Thank you guys for having me. I'm super pumped to be on.
That's awesome. We like to start always asking you, like, how did you start Jiu-Jitsu? Who was the person that kind of like brought Jiu-Jitsu to your life?
So that's definitely an easy one for me. My now husband, but at the time boyfriend, I guess it was 9 years ago, we had just started dating, and I was always an athlete growing up. And he was like a 1 or maybe he was like a 4-stripe white belt, and he would come home and like try these moves on me and be like, you have to try this. And I fought it for months. And I asked him the price. I'm like, I was definitely really frugal. I'd like had just become a new nurse. I was like 22, and I was like, I am not paying like over $100 to go train like and get sweaty with a bunch of men. But he kept coming home and putting me in triangles, and it was driving me absolutely nuts. So I finally agreed like one day to just go try it out, and like sure enough, we were learning triangles. And the best thing is he didn't even show up. He like did not come. It was a snow day, and he didn't make it to the gym. So this is like at the time random girl who's like now one of my good friends. She like took me under her wing, and I immediately like fell in love with it. And I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna come back like another day, because like we weren't dating very long, and I was like, if I like this, I'm never gonna leave. And the one of the females that like was training there at the time, she was also working there, and she basically like took me and was like, nope, you're signing up. And I signed up that day for like 6 months and haven't looked back since.
That's awesome. It's funny when you say that, like when you start dating someone and you start jiu-jitsu with them and it's just like a new relationship. It's kind of weird, like how you gonna approach that if that relationship ends. You never know how it's gonna be. It's something that I always think. I've been doing jiu-jitsu for almost 10 years. My husband's a black belt. And we're both in the same gym like since always. And I'm like, imagine if we ever broke up. Like, where would I go? Like, what would I do? When I got there, he's already a black belt. So I'm like, I think I would be the one that would have kind of like to leave. It's like it's his gym.
Right.
But like, what am I gonna do right now? I think it's something that happens, right? Like, I don't know if you have experience with friends that have been through this.
Oh my God.
I think it's a hard one.
I agree. I was like super nervous about it, especially like he was still a white belt, but it was definitely his gym. And now the gym was Paramount BJJ. That's like where I got my black belt. I still train there also. And I remember being like, this is going to be really difficult. And then we started seeing so many couples, like whether they met at the gym or somebody brought them like into the gym. And honestly, like the percentage of people that worked out was like not high. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is not good. But then I remember like by the time I think I was like almost done being a blue belt, I was like, oh, if we break up, I'm not leaving now. So I'm glad it worked out because I super love that gym. And now like everyone's our joint friends there. But yeah, it's scary. You never know.
Yeah, you're like, you're gonna have to deal with me for life right now because I'm hooked. I'm not moving.
Yeah,
I think that's what
absolutely.
we experience in our gym. Like everybody that has broke up, like they stay and they just figure it out,
Yeah.
and they stay within the community. It's a trip.
Yeah,
and
it's
you
Like
hard,
anywhere
but
else, you would be like later. Like I don't want
Yeah.
to see you again.
Yeah.
You
You have
know.
to be really mature, I think. Imagine like, I mean, I think you have the choice of like not rolling with a person or trying to not be in the same classes that they are. You can kind of be like,
Mhm.
hey, this is my schedule. Like, don't come to these classes. I won't come to the classes that you come, and like avoid as much as you can. And I think that's what kind of happens like at our gym with the people that broke up. But it's like if it becomes part of your life, you don't want to, because jiu-jitsu is community. Like you want to be around those people. That's one of the
Mhm.
most important parts of it. Like imagine you having to leave that space. That would be really hard. Like,
oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. But you're right. I feel like it's like definitely a weird thing because so many people don't want anything to do with their exes, but I feel like a lot of people make it work in jiu-jitsu because it's like it's home and you don't want to leave that either. So yeah.
Yeah.
makes sense.
I think the toughest part I've ever seen in those situations was when you see like the new partner come into the gym. And
Yeah.
it's just like because everybody knows everybody, right? It's like this small, tiny community, and it's like, whoa,
Yeah, that's rough.
that was
You're like,
risky business.
"Ooh." Yeah, yeah.
Eating the popcorn and was like, what is gonna happen right now?
Yeah,
It was like,
is she gonna show up again? I don't know.
Oh, that is so true. I like to watch it as long as I'm not in it. I'm like, oh gosh.
oh.
Yeah.
True. You're talking about the girl that took you under your wing. How many girls you guys had at the time? Like, did you have a good group of women? Do you think that would make any difference for you if, like, for example, there was no girls, like your boyfriend couldn't be there for you? You think your experience would be the same if there was just with the guys?
Man, that's a great question because I feel like I was out there roughing it. There was like two girls. One of them was already an upper belt at the time, and she would just beat me up all the time. So there was like maybe like three of us, if that. And there was plenty of classes that I would go to, and there was never girls. Like, and they weren't even like, I swear they weren't even normal sized guys. Like they would be like 200 plus. Like I'm only 110, so they were pretty big. I went to like my first, there was like a fundamentals class and intermediate class. And I went to my first intermediate and I was like, I should leave. I don't belong here. But like, what's crazy is they made me feel so at home. And I think that that's almost like sometimes could be a minority feeling, which I didn't know right away. But we didn't have a ton of girls until actually started working there. And when I think I was a blue belt, and we started getting in more and more girls. So now, like coming up through purple, brown, and black, I've had like consistently maybe like between 5 to 15 training partners at Paramount. But coming up like through the ranks, I was always like one of the higher ranked girls, and it was all guys. And it was kind of just like the norm. Like I would roll with everyone all the time. It didn't matter. And I never was nervous. Like they never hurt me. There was like really no ego. And then I love to travel to other gyms. So I've been to over 70 academies. I know, I like absolutely love it. I like to see the culture. I like to see like how it's run. And now I feel like I'm like so spoiled. Because as a competitor, I'm like, oh, I need girls. Like, and it's almost like I forgot, where I started. Because like it was the guys that I was training with all the time because there really wasn't a lot of women. And now we're getting to the point where like there's women everywhere. And at my gym that I own, we have like 40 girls. So I'm like super spoiled now. I feel like all women are my main training partners, but I will say like I didn't come up with them. I didn't come up with women all the time for every single round. And so I do have to like remember that sometimes that the guys actually were great and they kept me in it, which is really exciting.
What how do they make you welcome? Like the welcome feeling of like not being a minority? Like what did they do?
You know, I didn't even realize this was a thing then until I joined like the Facebook group, and I was like, wow, girls have some bad experiences sometimes. But honestly, like I've heard that a lot of girls will be like on the side and they won't have somebody to train with. But I was always like, people would always come up, all the bigger guys would come up, ask me to roll. They would roll very strategically. Like they wouldn't put their weight down. I mean, I've had some experiences, I'm sure here and there, everybody, female and male included, have. But for the most part, like being so small, I've never been injured by one of the bigger guys. Like they always were able to match my technique without matching strength, like without using their strength. Like I really wasn't like bullied by them. I've seen a lot of stories, unfortunately, where like they're getting, women are getting hit on or something along those lines. Granted, I did have a boyfriend there the whole time, but even outside of that, like everyone was like just so welcoming in that aspect. And they were always like cheering me on. I always like to compete, and the guys would always be interested in like how I was doing. Whereas I've like read horror stories where girls are like, they don't feel welcome. They're the only girl at the gym. And that it never felt like that for me. So that felt really lucky.
Yeah. That's awesome because, I mean, I think I'm lucky too. The gym that I started in Brazil, and my gym, we had some girls. I think like the highest belt at the time was a purple belt, and then we had some like another blue belt and some of the white belts that would come with me. Maybe like 5 of us that would be there more consistently. And at some point, like some more girls would come in, some would leave. And I think we don't realize that until we see other gyms and what's the difference that makes. I was working with the guys all the time, and like after I moved to the US and coming to my gym and understand and seeing other points of view, because I didn't have a lot of like women friends that did jiu-jitsu or that tried jiu-jitsu. I think it's a little different, at least at the time that I started there. Like the way that people would approach jiu-jitsu from what they do today, especially here in the US. But I see a lot of the girls coming in, and that's, for some of them, that's a problem. Like if there is no girls in class, if they can't find anybody that they could work with, they feel really uncomfortable. And when I mean, I try to understand their feeling, and at the same time, I try to explain to them, like, hey, most of the guys here, you're going to be completely fine going with them. I understand that you're going to be like, it's weird. It's a weird feeling. It's weird to see you be in such a close contact with somebody that you've never seen in your life, especially a man. And that's a good thing that we have a women's class right now, that I'm like, just come to this one. Now you can like kind of feel a little bit how it is, and then slowly get into the classes where you can work with the guys, or if you're in a class that there are girls, you can work just with the girls until you feel comfortable with it. But I think you said something that's really important, like especially for people that like to compete. It's really good to have that experience with the guys, because they're stronger than you, normally heavier, especially for you that you were on the smaller side of the bracket, let's say like that. They're stronger, they're heavier, but they have to be really technical with you. And then if you're doing something that it's working, it's because if your technique is on point. So you work really hard on your technique to make sure it's working against those heavier and stronger people. And looking at a self-defense point of view too, like if you have to use, it's going to be against a guy that's probably heavier and stronger than you. So you're already used to that too, right? So I think it's a great experience, and it's a good way that you can see the other side now and make that work for the girls that are coming to your gym, right? Like you have a huge group. It's a great number of girls, like 40 girls in your school. That way you can give them a different perspective maybe, but also give them the opportunity to work with the guys. And one of the things that I mean, at our gym, I think we have a good number too. We're probably around that number of girls trying to grow that. Like, what do you do? I don't know if that's a focus that you have at your gym, but like, what do you guys do to make sure that you get more women on the mats, that you make them feel comfortable, and that also you make them understand that in the sport, like when we're rolling, doesn't matter if you're a man, if you're a woman, like we're just training partners, like we're same.
Right. I think your point is like, it's super important because I do think we're still so spoiled now. Like a lot of the girls that come in, some of them definitely do have that fear and that thought, like, I don't want to roll with guys. Like it's very uncomfortable. And I can see that. Like our biggest thing is telling them, like, you're signing up for a sport where like you have to learn to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. Just like you said, like in a self-defense situation, it's probably gonna be a guy. you're not used to someone sweating on you to begin with. So just like being in those positions, I think is really important. But at the same time, to your like, how do we get the girls in? Like, do we kind of like help with that point? We're 50% women owned, which I think is probably a pretty big thing. Is my husband and I, and then our two best friends who are husband and wife. And the other female she's a blue belt. So I think that it's got to be, we're pretty young, like we're a younger gym. It's got to be something impactful. Because even at Paramount, which is, again, it's my home gym, it was a lot to try to get the girls in to stay. Granted, we do have like a really great girls program now, but as an owner, at Droogs, I feel like we probably cater to them a little bit more just because, one, I own the gym. So I'm always like checking in on them, making sure that they're okay. I don't want to say like we're not babying them, but we are also making sure like I didn't have anybody looking out for me being like, yeah, that's a safe round. You know, like there were some times where I would be like, hey, you're going a little too hard. But I'm definitely, out of the four of us, I feel like I stay the most as like a gym owner. So if I feel like somebody's not being good, I usually roll with them first. And I did that at Paramount for a long time too. I almost felt like I was obligated as like an upper belt female that like, if you have to learn how to speak up for yourself. Right. But some women are a little more nerve wracked to do that. So like I would go with the guys and be like, oh, don't go with that guy right away. Or like, hey, like we need to tell him. So I think we definitely do watch out for our girls. I know you mentioned you guys have like a women's class, and we do that too. And I think that's like definitely something that's changed recently in women's jiu-jitsu. Like I used to go to women's classes as a white and blue belt, and they were kind of like a socialized session, like a hangout. But now girls are taking it seriously, and like going to women's class is like, it's the same training. It's just there's all women there. And that's been big for us. Like I remember women's classes would be small because some people like wouldn't take it seriously, and now they're definitely growing. And I think that's like a good outlet for the women that are like not quite ready to roll with men, but then they start to trust men. And I'll tell you, girls are dogs, dude. I always tell them like, roll with the guys. They're going to be way nicer than the girls that are trying to beat you up in the gym.
That's what I was gonna say, because when you're like, now the classes are a little rough, and I'm like, I had some girls at my school saying like, I don't even want to go with the girls because I'm scared of you guys. And I'm like, you should, because we're gonna go 100% against each other.
Yep.
Like the men are gonna try to be a little nicer, they're gonna try to be managing, but my strength and your strength are gonna be pretty close to the same. So it's gonna be like for real.
Yes, exactly. They miss that. And white belt girls, woof, they're crazy. We just promoted like 3 girls. I said we just promoted 3 girls to blue, and I'm like, dude, they're wild. Like they are gonna kill each other in a good way, but like, wow. Yeah.
It's hard for me to find partners, like, because they don't want to roll with me. So it's like so true in the sense of,
For the girls, right?
yeah, for the girls, it's like easier to find a guy partner for me than for me to find like a woman partner that wants to like go head to head. So, but going back to what you were saying, being an upper belt and having, to like make sure that there's good training partners and who to watch out for the girls and being that voice, I think is huge. When I first started, there was one black belt woman in the studio, and she would do that. She would literally like let you know and give you a heads up of like who you should go with or who you shouldn't. And if she didn't provide that to you and she saw that somebody like totally just manhandled you and like did not have the etiquette that he should have had on the mat, like she was like, I got you. And she would go and she would wrap him up and like you put him in his place. And I was like, dang. But as a white belt, it felt good. Like, okay, I have somebody in my corner. And I had my partner started with me, and so I had my boyfriend there at the time, now husband. But it felt good to like have that female presence be like almost watching out for you. You know what I mean? Like you had somebody in your corner that understood where you're coming from, because even with my husband, like he'll be like, oh, just buck up and like, figure it out, So, I think that the upper belt female presence and having them be vocal and be a presence in the studio, even if they're not owners, is huge.
Yeah.
For sure.
You said something, it made me remember one of the guys at a gym that I don't even know if I saw when that happened, but it had a pretty bad situation with one of the girls that feel like really uncomfortable with him. And then the guys kind of like has a weird vibe. And I just got to him at that day, and I was like, I think I was a purple belt at the time, and I'm like, you know what? Let's do this. Like, don't row with any girls, even if they call you to row with you. Just say no, because I don't think you are a good partner for girls. And he's like, yes, I agree. And I'm like, perfect. So just like don't go.
I
Because
think
it's
that's
like,
so smart.
it's like you have to say something. If
Yep.
not me, somebody else would have to, and nobody wanted to say anything. So I'm like, I'm gonna be the one telling him just just don't go. Because if you're a white belt, you don't know who's safe, who's not. You're gonna try maybe to go for either like higher belts, black belts, brown belts, because that's what we tell them. Like, go with them.
It's
somebody
safer.
that knows-
Yeah.
yeah, somebody that knows what they're doing, or they're gonna look for the white belts because they're like right there with them. And that's the worst choice. Like, don't go with a white belt. He's gonna hurt you. So if I have the chance to tell the girl, like, hey, pick this one, this one, this one, these are really good partners for women, perfect. If I don't have the chance, like there was this one guy only that I told him just don't go, and he never went. So I think I saw him go in with a purple belt at some point, and he looked at me and he was like, she asked me too, and I'm like, this one is fine, she can handle herself, so like you guys
I
can
like
go.
it.
But like the other ones, no, just don't do it. So I think if you don't feel comfortable like saying something, sometimes either find a girl, find the gym owner, find the professor, like go on the side. I always tell this to people. There was another girl that got hurt training with a white belt, and he was like, I felt that I shouldn't have gone with him. And I'm like, why didn't you say something?
Yeah.
And she was like, I didn't want to like to be rude or anything. And I'm like, yeah, now you're hurt. You broke your arm. Now what are you gonna do? You know, they're like, just don't accept it. Just tell them like, hey, I'm sorry, nothing against you, but I don't want to get hurt. So I would rather not take the chance. Not with you, it's me. You know, like don't even blame them. It's just like
I
it's
like
me.
it. It's not you, it's
And
me.
then it's me. He's just like, I'm just gonna go ahead and go with somebody else.
I've like stopped like mid roll and was like, this isn't working out.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, Francisco, can you switch me really quick?
That's smart.
Yeah.
I
You
think
know?
one time I was a blue belt and we had like this new guy come in and my coach was watching and he was like throttling me. And usually I try to wait till the end of the round to like prove a point, but mid round I was like, you know, I'm like emotional. I'm like getting like sad. And I just stopped and I was like, you're going too hard. And then at the end, my like coach came up and he was like, I'm so proud of you for sticking up for yourself. Like, he was like, I was going to stop it, but like, I watched you do it. And I was like, you know what? And that was like the time where I was like, all right, this is it. I'm going to do this moving forward. Cause sometimes people, they just have like a hard time finding their voice. So until they get there. Yeah.
They do.
That's great. Talking a little bit about your competitive side. When did you start going into competitions and what made you make that decision? I think it's really hard for a lot of people that start jiu-jitsu, especially if they're not competitive like at all in life. I recommend a lot of everyone to do at least once in their lives, to compete at least once as a white belt, especially as like in the beginning. Go and get it done. You might love it, you might hate it, but see what's gonna happen. How was it for you to start that? And I mean, we know how it's going today, but if you want to talk a little bit about it, you already won 2 world championships, you have a bunch of fights coming up. Tell us a little bit about your trajectory. Is that a word?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Trajectory.
So I started competing really early. I started competing as a 1-stripe white belt, which at our gym, you test for stripes as a white belt at my home gym. And so I went out to compete before I ever even like took a no-gi class. Newsflash, it was not a good idea. Anyway, I got armbarred by the same girl 4 times because she was the only one in my division. But I've always been an athlete, like since I was like could walk. I just like love to compete. And for me, it was really important because it's how you test your skills. Like as I was getting better in the gym and, you know, women were coming in, I was training with smaller men. I felt like not that I was hitting a ceiling, but that I always needed to test myself outside to see like if the technique worked and like, you know, what I liked, what I didn't like. So I just kept at it as like a hobbyist. Like it was like a kind of a fun thing. Even at blue belt. And then my head coach, Brad, was like, at blue belt, I was like I had been trained. Most of my belts were all like 1 or 2 years, except for blue. I just like lived at blue belt. And I remember being like, how am I not getting my purple belt? I was winning a ton, but really I was not a good competitor. when I look back, it's like embarrassing. I don't even like to watch my matches, but he kept being like, you're going to be good. Like you should go try more in the IBJJF. And that wasn't my goal at all. It was really just to like test myself locally. And then finally I took his advice at purple belt. And that's when I feel like I started really falling in love with it. It was like a love-hate. Like I have a hard time mentally. That's always my biggest thing is like myself. So I always tell my students, like, it's you versus who you were yesterday. And that's kind of like how I see it day to day. But even at purple belt, I went out and like just started getting comfortable with getting on the mats, getting into the IBJJF. Because in my opinion, I just feel like the format is very difficult. Like just the feeling of being there is kind of scary. So, like getting in the bullpen and is your gi going to pass, like stuff like that. But after that, it has gotten a lot easier in the sense that I'm having fun now. But I'll tell you, really up until brown belt, I feel like I was absolutely horrible. I can't believe that I competed as much as I did, and I can't watch any of those matches back because even at purple belt, that was the first time I won worlds, and I was like, this is so embarrassing. I'll never watch that again. So I don't know. I feel like I'm ugh. I don't know. I feel like I thought I had new jiu-jitsu, and then every year when I do something different, I'm like, oh, now I'm finally learning jiu-jitsu. And I didn't really feel like that until the very end of purple belt, like where I was like, okay, I'm okay to watch sometimes. But I feel like for the most part, it's very like sloppy looking, and anything before like 2021, maybe even 2022, I don't want to watch any of that. So. Yep. And I think that keeps me going too, because I'm like, as a competitor, I'm like, oh, I need to like, these matches need to look better. So I got to keep trying to get out there. So when I won brown belt worlds, I can easily say that was the first time ever where I was like, oh, that was clean jiu-jitsu. Like I'll watch that match again. That was the first time ever. And that took me 8 years to get to that. So it's crazy. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I'm sure you can segue into plenty of things with that, but perfectionism has definitely been like something that I continuously touch on every day in life and in jiu-jitsu. So that's for sure. It comes out very much so.
Yeah, that's insane. It's funny because I love watching my white belt matches, and I'm like,
That's awesome.
look at this girl. What is she doing there? I'm like, I laugh at myself. I see it at the other way. I'm like, it's so good to see how much I've learned in these years and like how much I overcome, because I'm like, it was horrible too. Sometimes even at blue belt, when I think my purple belt was when I started looking a little better. But like when I see my blue belts and white, I'm like, what are you doing? Like,
what
are you even trying to do there? Like, it doesn't make any sense when I'm watching myself, but I think it's funny.
It is funny. It's definitely funny.
When you were saying something and it made me remember, I was talking about it, I think yesterday with somebody. And there was like, sometimes at our gym, we have cameras. So sometimes I'm training and I'm like, get a sweep on somebody. And I'm like, what? This is the best sweep ever. It was like so quick, so perfect. And I'm like, I'm gonna watch on the cameras. Why? Why did I watch?
It's amazing. It's
that looks
like not
horrible.
what you thought.
I'm like, it's better in my mind, I promise. I'm like,
I've definitely been there. Definitely. And I'm like, oh, this is gonna be the greatest thing I've ever seen. And then I watch it and I'm like, nope, that wasn't it.
delete it. I'm gonna delete the whole day just thinking
The whole day.
nobody can see this anymore. Oh my god. You do a lot of like open weight fights too. Is there any reason why you would choose that? Being at 110 pounds, like why do you pick those matches?
I did for a while. I probably am not going to as much. But I don't know. It's always hard to find people to fight, especially locally. So like coming up through white, blue, and purple, I would just be like, whatever. Whoever I can find, I'll find. And honestly, I think it was brown belt was the hardest belt to find anybody to fight. Like I was like, I'll fight black belts, I'll fight purple belts. It was just impossible. So, but there was a lot of scenarios for some reason at brown belt specifically that I was like offered to be in like absolute brackets. And so I would be like, okay. I think the funnest one was I did like a Naga, maybe at the start of like last year, and it was like a 165 pound division. But it was like mixed, like there was brown, purple, there was blue belts in there. So it was like I don't know. I like to test my skill like that. And then I got a little too excited and did this grappling tournament called HCS against like some high level upper belts. And they were all like so much bigger than me. And I got my butt kicked. And I was like, this is not my best idea. So I haven't been doing it as much. And now that everyone's getting good, especially at brown and black, they should be good. I probably won't, but sometimes in the IBJJF, like we call it house money. Like you just won, first, second, or third, you're invited to go to the open weight. Like it's free. Throw spaghetti at the wall and see what happens. It's cool. If you take down the big girl, that's cool. If you don't and you get smashed, okay. So
yeah.
At least
I don't know. I
it's
love
one
it.
more match, right? Like at least you have the chance to fight a little bit more and maybe have a different like experience in there. Even though it's hard and there's the other side too, you could get hurt. You got to be careful with that. But it's another match.
Yeah, I like it. I feel like it's free. Let's just do it. So I don't know. It's not always a good idea. I've definitely been humbled a couple times where I've been like, well, this is really bad. But other times I'm like, this is a great idea.
What is your like execution plan? Like when you're like about to go up against somebody that's like super big, like what is your go-to? Like,
I'm definitely a guard puller by nature, but I try to not do that against bigger girls. So I will say I've been varied. I like to jump. I do guard jump. And if anybody watches my matches, it's like definitely not a secret at this point. But sometimes I go in and I'm like, I'm wrestling them. So I have wrestled a couple 165ers. I went out, it was to that Naga, and I was like, I'm wrestling. And one of the girls did go down, and I was so proud of myself. The other girl, I think I ended up pulling on her because I like touched her and I was like, I'm never getting this girl down. And she made like a critical mistake where she like sat back for a foot lock, and I came up and I was like, thank goodness. I can't, that was never getting to the top of that match. So, but genuinely, I try to make it funny because I want to go out and have fun. I feel like competition anxiety is so real. So if you don't go out and have fun and like, then you're going to have a hard time. I used to go out and be like, I'm going to win, I'm going to do this. And now I go out and I'm like, I'm going to have fun. And I feel like winning comes with that because I'm less stressed.
Yeah. You're talking about the mental health part. That's the hardest part for you. Is there anything in particular that you do before competitions, especially the biggest ones, like your super fights, your worlds? I think I always make words like a huge monster in my mind. Is there anything specifically that you do to get yourself ready and in the mood?
I train hard all the time, obviously, but I feel like, it doesn't matter the day of the week. I'm always ready to compete. You could send me out anytime. I'm always like in fight shape is what I feel like. But coming up to it, I try not to think about it at all because I will psych myself out until probably the day of when I start getting like, it's just inevitable. I'm like, my stomach hurts because I can feel it. But I have a very specific warm-up routine, and that always puts my mind in a good spot. In it, I like to listen to like the same music. I do my warm up, and then I don't know if you guys have ever heard of I think it's the Red King monologue by Rory McDonald. Maybe I listen to it before every single fight, whether it's in the IBJJF, whether it's a super fight. You guys have to listen to it. It's like 2 minutes long max on YouTube, and it's just about this guy that goes out and he just remembers that he's like having fun doing like what he wants to do with his life, and that it always makes me happy. And then I go in and my coach tells me like, take away the negative thoughts. So I'll be like, oh God, I'm going to lose. And then he'll be like, replace that with something positive. So like, I'm the best guard puller. And then I only think about that. So that's kind of like how I get into every single routine. Yeah. Yeah.
What are your plans? For you guys that are listening to it right now, this episode's going out in March, but I saw that you have 2 fights coming out now in end of February and another one beginning of March. What are your plans now as a black belt? Like, what do you want to accomplish this year? What are your goals?
Oh, this is such a good question because I've been thinking about it a lot. So I've been doing masters recently for the IBJJF, and I promised myself even before I knew I was going to get my black belt that I was only going to do adult this year. Leg locks are actually like one of my like strongest suits, so I don't even know why I like neglected that. It's just like sheer like being afraid. But in super fights, I always go against people like significantly younger than me and like adults. So for the IBJJF, I want to do all adult all year, finish with some like pretty legit leg locks, and hopefully like podium at Adult Worlds. That was like my absolute goal for that. unfortunately, I just like wanted to debut in Miami, and then I only had one person, and she ended up pulling out. But for the super fights, my first one it's local. It's actually at our gym. It's called Arena Grappling, which is like a really fun format. I'm excited about it, but sorry, it's my dog. But the girl she's a brown belt, and I actually I'm really excited for it. I think it's gonna be a fun match, but I think the fact that that she's not a black belt, it doesn't feel like a debut for me. So I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit more excited for Toro Cup, which is gonna be in North Carolina, and that's gonna be a seasoned black belt, and so I feel like that will be really fun. Those I'm excited for, but I really want to get back to the IBJJF and see how I do at adult. And then on the other side, my goals are just kind of to teach as many places as I can. I've taught at a lot of gyms locally, but my first goal for the year was to teach outside of the state that you couldn't drive to. And I just taught in 10th Planet Boca Raton. So shout out to Heather Jo Clark. She was in the UFC in the past, and I was able to teach a class there. So that was really exciting.
That's awesome. Why do you travel so much? You were talking about in the beginning, you've been to 70 schools. I think that's amazing. I don't get to travel that much and visit different schools. I did visit a few, but definitely not even close to what you did. What do you think it's why do you think it's good, and why do you do it so much?
It's pretty purposeful in the sense that I do it because I like to see. I'm a bucket list girl. So I really wanted to travel to 100 gyms. So if Jess Bermudez watches this, she's a black belt that I super admire. We're really good friends. She told me that she started writing gyms down that she goes to just to have a list back when I was a blue belt. And I was already traveling to other gyms because I love my gym, but I think it's important to learn from a lot of different people. Everyone has different games. When I was a blue belt, my leg lock game, I learned from the Blue Basement when John Danaher was still in New York. And that honestly, I didn't know how lucky I was at the time, but that started it. I started just collecting the names of gyms. So now when I go to travel, whether it's for a tournament or for work or I'm going to go vacation somewhere really cool, I have to do jiu-jitsu. I went and had my bachelorette party, and the girls were like, this is insane. In the mornings, you're waking up at 6 a.m. to go to 3 different jiu-jitsu gyms. But that was fun to me. So I just feel witnessing the culture is really cool because everyone's different. Meeting people is really fun. And then trying to get to 100 gyms. So I was all right, I'm going to push for it. So.
That's fun.
I wanted to touch now, kind of mixing your personal life a little. You're a registered nurse. We know that the nurses have a really heavy schedule. It's not just the nurses, but you guys have a pretty hard schedule. How do you fit everything? Being a nurse, being a gym owner, being an athlete, competing. How do you try to organize all of that so you can do everything?
It's interesting. It's definitely a pace that I probably can't do long term, but for nursing, I initially was doing 3 13-hour shifts at the hospital. And then I would have 4 days off. So for that, I lived 2 minutes from my gym, and I would just train really late and then really early. And then my husband and I have been talking about opening a gym for maybe at least 5 years now. So I had worked as a hospital nurse for the past, I was there for 10 years. And then we were you know what, let's send it. So a year and a half ago, well before that, we came up with the business plan. But a year and a half ago, we officially opened Droogs MMA and Jiu-Jitsu with our 2 best friends. And we went big. So basically, we decided to get married that year. The gym stumbled upon us. We not stumbled, but the building. We were we'll just casually research buildings because we wanted to buy and just be big from the start. I felt our marketing was pretty good. I was managing Paramount. Well, we found the first building and we were this is the building. So we bought the building, and then life just seemed to change rapidly. I realized that I needed to be at the gym 7 days a week. So I ended up leaving the hospital and becoming a hospice nurse. And it's been great. It's just it's different. Everyone is, inevitably going to die, but these people are pretty much within 6 months of living. And I like it. It's a lot lonelier because I don't work with a team that I see regularly. So now it's I wake up in the morning. Most days I teach at my gym that I own at 6 a.m. And then once I'm done there, I start my nursing job at 8. And then they let me leave early because I start early. And then I go back to my gym to teach and train. My gym's like 45 minutes from where I live because I live 3 minutes from my home gym. So we didn't want to like encroach on his territory, but I'm still training there. So I travel the 45 minutes to my gym, teach, and then I think like 2, sometimes 3 nights a week, especially if I'm in like camp for a tournament, I'll drive back after I teach, and then I'll train at my home gym. And then we have 2 pets. So then I come home and we don't go to bed until like 12:30 or 1 o'clock, and then we're up the next day. So my mom's like, this is crazy, you're gonna burn out, and I'm sure I am. But right now we're sustaining, and it's been like a year and a half. But at some point, like, we'll have to change something because I am definitely tired. So
No,
Yeah.
yes. Just from you talking, I'm like, first of all, why you were waking up at 6 a.m.
yeah, well, I'm up at like 5:30 to be there at 6, and like we really don't go to bed until like past midnight. I'm finally proud to say this, like, officially on a podcast, that like we're not having kids. I feel like that used to be like a scary thing to say, but we're in a new generation, so we don't have children. We're not going to have kids. We have like fur animals, and that lets us have like a pretty free schedule. But so I feel like I've been able to stay younger for longer. But it's definitely tiring. Some Saturdays I'm like, we get home, I'm like, I need to just nap for like 5 hours. So.
Yes, that's important. Yeah, because it's like, especially if you're competing, if you're on that like training hard, trying to get ready for a fight or something, and you have all of those things. I talk for myself, like I have a pretty busy schedule, and I'm not waking up at 5 a.m. to work at 6 a.m. But I don't stop all day, but I'm back home and I can go to bed at like 11, but I
That's
can wake
still
up at
long
like 7. And it's like yours is a little harder than that, and you have all the responsibilities being the gym owner. That's a lot. It's a lot on your mind of like making sure that your students are being taken care of, that your needs are being taken care of. You're married, you have your husband, you have your pets, even though you guys don't have kids. A lot of the times the pets are harder than the kids, because you can't
Take
really
it easy.
them.
Take it easy, okay, over there.
Kids. Like,
I got pets and I got kids, okay?
I will give you credit. Oh man, that's a lot.
I know, but you can't bring your dog everywhere. Your kid, you're kind of kin, and people kind of like expect your kid to be at some, like, to give you a little bit of trouble or something. Having a pet, it's hard too.
Kids are wild, though. I give you guys so much. We teach the kids class, and I'm like, honestly, that was the form of birth control that I needed. It was.
When I'm at the gym at the kids classes, and people ask me like, "Are you sure you want to have kids?" I don't have kids yet, but I want to. And people are like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, right now, I don't. Ask me again maybe later.
Yeah.
When all these kids are gone, I might still want it, but like right now, no. I just hate. Sorry, but like I just hate all of them. They're like making so much noise. They're making such a mess. I'm like, I don't want to look at them anymore. It's hard.
Yeah.
I agree.
And they never go away.
Nope. You have them for life, and they're really expensive. I can't believe how expensive they are. That was like wow. I can't believe they cost a lot of money.
I don't know, but my animal is kind of expensive too, though. So.
Yeah, they're expensive too. But your kids, they need so much stuff. Like there's so much stuff that they need to have.
We as society think that they need so much stuff, and they really don't.
They don't need as much stuff.
No, because they don't play with half of it.
True. That's a good point.
You know what I mean?
So, water bottle.
Anyhow.
It's like a puppy. Give them a water bottle. They're gonna be fine. They'll play with
No,
it.
for sure. The things that you think that they like wouldn't have fun with, like that's what they go for, and then everything else that you bought, thinking that it's going to entertain them, like not at all. Like my son the other day, he had this little car that he got. He's like, "Man, I wish I still had my my race car, like Hot Wheel set." And I was like, "Bro, you've had that since you were 3, and I can count on 2 hands how many times you have used it. We finally got rid of it, and now you want it?"
He's like, today was the day that I was going to start.
Yeah, today I was gonna like go hard on it. I was like, get out of here. I can't.
Leave me alone before I choke you. You're talking about your pets. I saw on your Instagram you have a little raccoon. Like, how did that baby came to you?
So unfortunately, our raccoon passed away. But that is okay. He was like the light of our lives. So it was my husband. I feel like if you guys aren't putting the theme together, like people think it's me being crazy, but he's so crazy. he comes up with everything. My like motto is like, oh, let's try everything once for the experience. So when we met again, he's like, let's do jiu-jitsu. And also I'm obsessed with raccoons. Let's get a baby raccoon. And we weren't even living together yet. My mom was like, no, Cathryn. And I was like, send it. So got this little baby. He was 1 month old, and we had him, I think, for like 6 years. That is a child, but he was on like steroid child. Like, they are so smart. He slept with us. He had his own bedroom. He like in his bedroom, he had like a swing set, and he had bunk beds, and he had a tire and a tree. Like, he was so cool, but he took up all of our time, which was fine. It was just, he was wild. We like had to really change our entire life for him. And then of course, unfortunately passed away, but we've had a ton of little friends in our house, and are actually who crossed with our raccoon. And how we got him from our raccoon is our skunk, who we actually currently have. Let me see if I can grab him. And this is Miko. So he's a little sillier and a little stupider, unfortunately, than the raccoon, but he's really cute, and he gets into less stuff. So we have him, and they were really good friends. And then we have this is our little puppy here. And so those are the two guys in the house right now. But the raccoon used to have his own Instagram. He is really cool, if you guys ever want to check out his old videos.
How do you go about getting like a wild animal?
That's a good question too. So not all states it's legal in. In our state, you just need like a permit of sale from like either like a wildlife rehabber or a breeder. So we got the raccoon. My husband, honestly, I don't even know how we found it, but we drove like 4 hours to pick up our raccoon, and he came with like his permits and stuff, and then. We've had some really interesting experiences. Like the game commission came and tried to tell us that like it wasn't like they thought it wasn't legal, but we had everything. Like, you need everything in line. So that's how we got him. And then through like, you just start to be part of these weird communities. They're like, oh, you have a raccoon? Like, are you interested in this? So we started being part of skunk communities. We met a ton of people. And then this skunk lady was like pretty friendly with us. I think she's bred raccoons before. She like reached out and she was like, do you want to foster this skunk named Miko? So he was in such a bad spot. We fostered him, and then obviously we just got attached to him. So now we have Miko too. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Oh my God. Kat, I wanted to touch into something that might not be so happy to talk about, probably not really happy, but I think it's important for us to talk to. You talk on your social media about your eating disorder that I believe you had in the past, but from what I heard, like it's something that you're gonna take for life, right? It's not something that just disappears, and you don't feel it anymore or anything like that. I wanted you to talk a little bit about it, like how was that experience, that journey, and also, and going into the competitiveness of jiu-jitsu. A lot of the times we have to cut weight to fight, or we are so worried about eating and what we're going to eat and how to prepare, how that interferes too on your jiu-jitsu journey.
So it's definitely something I don't talk about often. You'll catch me sometimes posting about it, but it's hard because I've had it for so long. It started when I was 13. For reference, I'm 32 now, and I don't like to say that it's gone, because first off, I would be lying, but second off, I think it's the easiest way to compare it is to like an alcoholic, right? Like, even if they're not an alcoholic anymore, there's always a risk, and especially with food or in relationships with food and like body image now, especially now more than ever in social media, it feels lifelong. But to go back on the jiu-jitsu thing, when we were talking about the absolute division, how I started competing up was I did not weigh myself. So when I was a white belt, I wouldn't have been able to tell you how much I weighed. I knew that I definitely didn't weigh 135 pounds. So that was the division I would put myself in, because I wouldn't have to get on the scale. I wouldn't look at it. And so honestly, I think that's probably how I got good at going against bigger girls, because I would just weigh in there and like hope for the best. And then, I started taking it a little more seriously, and my coach was like, you're definitely giving up. Like, now I know I'm giving up. I'm 110 and 115 on like another day. So I was giving up a good amount of weight. But I think it's really important with jiu-jitsu because there's two sides to it. As a competitor, you have to be really cautious. I do not cut weight. if I need to, like, you know, for the IBJJF, I'm a light feather and that's 114. I could definitely make rooster, but it's not worth my mental health. So like I don't cut weight. I try to be very smart about like what I eat. Like I love ice cream. I'm all about balance with that. But then on the other side, it's been life changing. Like I hate to say that jujitsu changed my life, but it really did, in the sense that it keeps me grounded and disciplined. Because I think what people think is like, oh, you have an eating disorder, it just has to do with food. But there's so much going on behind it that leads up to it. And whether it be me feeling good physically by training regularly, or mentally, like I'll get on the mat you guys know, when you're doing jujitsu, you can't think about anything else, especially coming up now. You know, I'm getting better. I can, you know, maybe multitask a little bit more, but as a lower belt, you know, you're constantly thinking through situations in your head, which is why I think I fell in love with jujitsu. There's always something new to learn, and it takes away your ability to think about what's happening outside of that. So that's where the positive comes from with the eating disorder. The negative is obviously weight cutting, which, like I said, we have fighters and we have some wrestlers, and I feel like the thing is people don't understand how dangerous it can be. So I don't mind like helping them, but I also don't encourage it if somebody feels like uncomfortable. We have a girl that, you know, maybe she could go down a little bit and she needs to cut 2 pounds. Like I would never tell her to do that unless, you know, she verbalizes that she feels comfortable. But it's been a really long thing. And I think it's really good to talk about, because I think there's a lot more people in the world that have it or have like pieces of it than you would expect. Every time I post, I'm like pleasantly shocked at how many people reach out and are like, thank you for sharing this. I had no idea. Or like, I also have like XYZ. And so I think it's something that's like really underrated, but that should be talked about more. And as much as I hate talking about it, I think that it's really important, because there isn't enough people that are willing to be like, you know what? Yeah, like this is definitely like an ongoing thing. And it's important to understand more about it, because if you don't have one, I think a lot of people don't understand how it works either.
You're talking about something. Sorry, I just wanted to touch on that. That you said something that it's really important. Like, for example, I try to convince a lot of people to compete, and when I'm telling them, I'm like, how much do you weigh? And let's say for Shay, for example, last words, she was like really trying to cut, and I'm like, I'm the person that it's going to be giving her incentive of like, yes, let's cut the weight and let's like try to get here, because I think you're going to do better. But I never thought about the other side. What if I'm going to use Shay here as an example, but like, what if Shay has eating disorder and I'm helping her to get into that, like that state, or I don't know, like how would someone approach somebody in a way as a jiu-jitsu coach or a professor, where if you don't know if that person suffers any like eating disorder, any like mental issues that they have, like how would you approach them on that way? Just like maybe, hey, do you want to compete? Okay, like would you ask them which weight they're competing on? Like what are the things that you think that could trigger somebody that we as like coaches and professors should avoid asking or mentioning even maybe?
That's a great question. And the word that you use there, I think is really important. Triggers is something that a lot of people aren't aware of, but a trigger can happen for so many reasons that most of us don't understand. And it can be something like completely like innocent. So I try to approach it just to be like, we do need to know the weight. So I'll be like, what weight would you be competing at? Do you know what weight you walk at? And like, are you comfortable talking about this? Because originally I was like, you know, maybe I just won't say anything. But in this day and age, things have been coming up a ton. Like even with, this is like a completely different subject, but somehow relatable. We had a person that came in that was non-binary. And I like didn't think to ask, like you don't ask new students like, are you a guy or a girl or neither? And that was like something that was like really eye-opening for me, because then we started having competitors, younger students, and I would be like, you know, we should at least just ask them like, hey, like, have you considered what weight you would be at? Like, how do you feel about it? And it's just like I think the more you communicate about it, if they're comfortable talking about it, you get better responses, instead of just not bringing it up at all. So I don't think that there's like a right or wrong, but I think that the important part is that you just ask, like, and not like straight up like, hey, do you have issues with food? It's more so like when somebody's getting ready to compete, like, hey, do you know what weight class you would be like do you know if you walk at the actual, like, near that weight? Because some people, they also just don't know. And I'll be like, are you somebody that, like, you're considering, like, dropping to a certain weight class or not? And then if they are, we just want to make sure they're doing it as healthy as possible. I've had a couple experiences where I've seen people drop it very unhealthy, and it's led to negative consequences. So we are just, like, cautious in what they're doing. You know, even now, like, with my husband, I'm always like, he's fine. He doesn't have any issues, but I'm aware that he needs to cut some weight he has his first MMA fight coming up. So if you guys want to watch that, it's at AJ Deshani. But anyway, and I'm just, like, very, like, hey, like, let's just make sure we're, like, not doing, like, you know, silly things to cut weight. Let's try to get it off as healthy as possible. So I think it's just an open dialogue. We have some bigger students. They come in. We had a person come in once, and they are competing at a really high weight. And I didn't think it was going to be a good experience for them. So we just kind of, like, kept the conversation open. Like, are you sure you're comfortable here? Like, let's talk about, like, different options and thoughts, like what's going to happen in the tournament, like, because they could be significantly bigger. And then I usually share my own story, if, like, not all of it, but, like, pieces of it to help people understand, like, just where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Did you have a
I
question?
think even in my experience, right, Babby, like, having, you know, your professors, like, really engaged, and your partners, your rolling partners engaged. So, like, Babby and Hoff were super engaged, and they're like, you aren't cutting it, you know, as fast as you think you're going to, and you might just want to bump it up a weight and just be done with it, you know, and having those open dialogues and feeling comfortable to do that with your students. And I, you know, just said, yeah, I guess you're right. Like, I should probably stop because I'm not cutting it, you know, like, it's like one of those things when you don't want to cut weight, like, your weight goes down, and then when you're trying to cut weight, you're like, why isn't it going down? Normally it's, like, so easy. It just fluctuates. But yeah, having those open dialogues, I think, are huge with your students.
I think
Yeah,
it's for
definitely.
everything, right? Like, for the more that we talk to people, the more I see that, like, in jiu-jitsu, a lot of people don't think we need to talk. They just focus on the aggressive part of it and, like, the fighting part of it. And we are people inside those gis, and every person is different. Every person has a different life, a different background. So when we talk about things, we're open, and we open that space for them to talk about their experiences too. We're giving those people opportunities to tell us what they need, what they want. Same way for us, we open that opportunity for us to tell our professors and our partners, our training partners, like, hey, this is what I want, this is what I can do, this is what I can't do. And then we just go from there, right? So that being open and being able to talk and understand each other, I think that goes a long way on everything.
Agree. Like, you could answer that question for everything. Like, what do you have to do? You have to communicate. Like, especially when you're in, like, a macho man gym. Not that I don't feel like I am, but, like, it is a sport where you're, like, trying to hurt each other politely. So I feel like the communication has to be, like, it has to be on. I'm always telling, like, my students, my husband, my friends, I'm like, use your words. Use your words.
In the kids.
Yeah.
Just for us to finish here, the name of our podcast, it's BJJHOOD. What does BJJHOOD means to you?
It's a whole lifestyle. That's what it means to me. And so I'm hoping it's something like that, but it feels like a place where you can come and talk about all the things that you're interested in, whether it's jiu-jitsu related or not, but also the sense that it connects to everything. And I feel like maybe that's just a me thing, but we'll talk about life, and I feel like I always end up back in the BJJ conversation. So I just feel like when we're here, we're always just talking about that whole lifestyle, which translates to me as BJJHOOD.
That's awesome. Cath, thank you so much for taking your time today to talk to us, to opening a little bit, talk about your story, your goals, your jiu-jitsu journey. It was awesome to have you today. I hope you can come visit in California sometime soon so we can train
What part
together.
are you?
We are in Encinitas, so we are north of San Diego, like 30 minutes.
Oh, I'm there. Put it on my gym list.
Put it on your gym list, put it on your calendar. Come visit us. It would be awesome.
It's one of the cutest little communities in San Diego County as a whole. If you if you ever want to come to San Diego, I mean, there's little hubs for sure that are cute, but I think that's the cutest beach city.
Oh, you guys don't have to tempt me. Like, you'll be like, oh, book a flight, and I'll be like, okay, I'll be there next Saturday.
That's awesome.
Come in August, September. It'll be the hottest time of the year.
Oh my gosh. Okay,
by the time Shay's surgery, she's gonna be probably fine to be back in training. She's
Oh God.
off right now. Got a little knee surgery going on, but she's probably
Oh man.
I got 170 days, okay, and then I will be back on the mats.
I like it. It'll go fast.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. And for you that are watching today, make sure you share this episode with somebody that can learn a little bit from us, that can take something from this conversation. Make sure you're following us on YouTube. That's where we have the subtitles in Portuguese for the interviews that are in English, and the subtitles in English for the interviews that are in Portuguese. Also follow us on your favorite. Oh my God, I don't know what's going on right now. Follow us on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss any of the new episodes that are coming out, and that you're following us on Instagram so you don't miss any of the news and the informations on our guests. We'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. Would you like to share your story? Email us at bjjhoodpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at BJJHOOD Podcast.